and welcome to the Shadow Demon Talks. Today, we have a local celebrity, Ross Gilbert, also known as Wossy Plays, and also known for his channel PTCGRadio. Greetings.
Hello.
Now, you're in a lot of TCG communities. While there is still no English release, how does the Digimon community compare to others?
It's awesome. I love the Digimon community. Everyone's really nice. Anyone that follows me on Twitter, at the Wossy, will know that there is one community that I find is not very accepting. Generally speaking, TCG communities tend to be, but I think the special thing about Digimon is because, the game's not out yet. So anyone that's in on the game yet is basically going in there on faith, and it's just faith and enthusiasm and belief that it's actually going to come out over here. And I think that's made everyone a little bit happier and friendlier and more optimistic. Though I do worry that if it goes too long without a release being announced, I don't know whether that's going to make some sectors of the community be like, I've been here for so long.
Right. So, the Pokemon TCG is obviously close to your heart, and integration of other TCG players is an important step for surviving in this market. What would you say is the best approach to try and get a Pokemon TCG player into the Digimon card game?
It really depends. It can be hard to just blindly get someone into a trading card game. Generally speaking, right, with any card game, you've got two ways of getting people in. You can get them in on the license, in this case Digimon, or you can get them in on the gameplay. For me personally, I kind of like Digimon. I've never been a Digimon dude personally. I've seen some of the anime and I've seen the films at friends' houses when they put them on and all of that. But I was never going to get into this TCG based on Digimon. Not because I don't like the license, but because I don't particularly like it. Now compare that to something like Pokemon or Transformers or Final Fantasy, where the license alone is going to get me in the door and go, right, let's have a go with this. So for me, at the moment, I'm in that stage where any new TCG, I'll take a look. Some stick, some don't. Soon as I found out the mechanics of Digimon, I was like, this is a mechanically sound game. This is awesome. And I was in. As soon as the full rulebook came out, I was all the way in. Whereas there are other games that you can see on the channel that I've started covering and dropped off because, I'll always enjoy any card game for a few rounds, but after a few rounds, you need something to build you in. So, to go back to your actual question, if they're that person who liked Pokemon and Digimon as a kid, it's easy. If not, you've got to convince them that it's a fun game. The difficulty you've always got with TCGs is they're not cheap. And a lot of the time, getting someone into a new TCG is a pretty big financial commitment. So it's not just going, hey, this game is fun, or hey, remember how you like Digimon? It's also trying to convince them to pay out in that regard, which is why new card games have such a difficult time building in. But they're the two options you've got. And it really depends on the individual and who you're talking to.
Right. So, actually, bouncing off what you just said, we're only just now seeing cards from the second set, and we already have a ton of abilities and options. Have you seen this in other card games, and how have those card games fared?
This is generally quite standard. We seem to be seeing fewer vanilla. Now, to be fair, the vanilla cards are more likely to be released later. But again, if I go to Transformers, in the first set, there were loads of vanilla cards. And then in the second set, there were a couple of vanilla cards. And now, Wave 5 has just come out for that game. Vanilla cards aren't a thing anymore. What we do have is new mechanics. Now, I will say Digimon is piling on the new mechanics. When we first got the hint of new colors in Wave 2, I said very publicly on numerous occasions, I refuse to believe that we're getting 2 new colors in Set 2 after having a new color in Set 1. To go from 3 in the starter decks to 6 in Set 2, that just seemed over the top to me. Clearly, I was wrong about that. And they just keep going. Already we've seen a bunch of new keyword skills. We've seen Reboot. We've seen... I forget what it's called. The one that purple Digimon have.
I've heard both Vengeance and Companion.
Vengeance, and yes, that one. We've seen a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, generally speaking, there is a limit to how many new mechanics you can bring in that quickly. I mean, if you look at something like Pokemon, which has been going for well over 20 years at this stage, I mean, the new set which is leaking in Japan at the moment is kind of, we're in the reveal loop for that. They have one new thing, and that's cool. For a game that's on set, goodness knows what, well over 50, having one new mechanic is a cool thing. And we tend to see that in TCGs. They ramp up at the beginning, and then they kind of level off and start to slow down.
I see. Now, as we were discussing earlier, we all obviously want an English release, but with the pandemic, it might be some time before we see one. Assuming we are decently behind the Japanese release, what do you think would be a healthy method of releasing sets?
So, in terms of the English release, I mean, there's a few different ways to do it. Pokemon have always been pretty good at being behind. They've gone, look, Japan is first. And there are weird things. I mean, the Delta species set, we got 3 days after Japan, but because we get pre-releases and they don't, we actually got that set before they did, which is kind of fun. But generally speaking, with Japan, are 5 months behind. Whereas you take something like Dragon Ball Super, that released in the US, and we then got it in Europe a little bit later, but they just went full steam ahead. I mean, at one point, it was something ridiculous like 3 full expansions and a few other products in the space of 4 months. Like every month there was something. We'd get wave 2, and then we get wave 3, and then we get a bunch of promo stuff, and then we get wave 4, and there was like a 4 or 5 month period where, and I mean, I've really tried to keep up with that game, but it just completely did in any European interest from a whole bunch of people, just because it was too fast. And it really depends where you want to go. I mean, to take the Digimon example again, Bandai, who make the game, they wanted to integrate the American and European scene. They wanted to have these tournaments basically going on at the same time, so they had to catch up. So they had to basically have one period where the releases were really quick, and then of course they level out, and now they're basically the same everywhere. Whereas with Pokemon, they have no real interest, at least it seems that way, of matching up the Japanese and English release schedules. And except for the World Championships in August, Japanese and English, American, European, whatever, they're kept very, very separate. So there really is no reason to try and sync up those releases. And here's the weird thing about Digimon, right? They're a Japanese company, so surely they'll follow the Pokemon line. But then again, surely it's Bandai, they'll follow the Dragon Ball line. And actually, we have no way of knowing, because what they're doing with Digimon is nothing like what they were doing with Dragon Ball Super. I really don't think we can read anything into that whatsoever. If you ask for my opinion, I reckon what's going to happen is we're going to have slightly closer releases to bring us vaguely close to them. But I don't think we'll catch up, not in the short term at least anyway. I think there's always going to be like a healthy few month gap between releases. Though again, I have no basis to this whatsoever and could easily be wrong about that.
Right. So, speaking of hypotheticals, when the trial decks released in Japan, they were exceptionally cheap at around $5. Now, from what you've seen from other card games, do you think we can expect a similar price, or will it be closer to most trial decks in America?
See, I don't know, because when they first released, right, you were right, they were 500 yen. They were ridiculously cheap. But Pokemon have just released a bunch of V-decks over in Japan, a series of 9 decks, each corresponding to a different type, with a nice shiny Pokemon V card and a full 60-card deck that you can just go and play right out the box. Very, very similar to what Digimon did. And they launched them for 500 yen. The thing to remember is, and I think this is going to disappoint a few people if and when we do get an English release, cards are cheaper in Japan. Singles are cheaper, boxes are cheaper, theme decks are cheaper. I mean, if I were ever to be lucky enough to actually get over to Japan, the amount of Pokemon product I could buy for the same amount of money in the UK is absolutely ridiculous. So I do think we are going to continue to see cheap starter decks, at least in the short term. But I think if they come over here, I wouldn't expect them to be $5 decks. I would expect them to be $10 decks. Because if you look at TCGs in the US, there is no such thing as a $5 starter deck. You look at Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball, any card game you like, $10 to $15. That's what a starter deck costs for basically any game. So there is absolutely no reason for Digimon to come over and be like, hey, these are $5, and everyone going, but that's like half the price of the next cheapest one. Maybe you see a slight reduction to try and get people invested, but honestly, $10 for a starter deck would still be pretty cheap, and there's just no reason to go that cheap. Whereas in Japan, there are other games going that cheap, so they've got to, like, you don't necessarily have to be the cheapest, but as a new game, you have to be among the cheapest, because you've got to try and drag people in. So I think in Japan they'll keep seeing cheaper decks, but I wouldn't expect it over here.
Right, that makes sense. So, from everything we've seen, what decks interest you the most right now?
I mean, in New Evolution, it was just yellow. I'm just absolutely fascinated by yellow. It's not proving itself in tournaments over in Japan at the moment. It's not proving to be some kind of powerhouse. And the yellow cards are underpowered and they're kind of expensive. And there's plenty of good reasons to look at yellow and go, yeah, mate, that's not actually very good. But there is a yellow, and I don't think anyone's made it yet, but there is a yellow deck out there with loads of recovery, making it extremely difficult to get rid of all your security cards, and where it doesn't really matter if Digimon are active or resting. You can just use all of those yellow skills that reduce power to just take them all out anyway. I just think of them, and it might be that we're missing a couple of cards. Like, it might be that everything's just a little bit expensive and weak for the time being, but you give it a couple more cards in Ultimate Power or whatever set 3 ends up being, and it all comes around. Although the Granku Wagamon Dimension Scissor combo, to just completely wipe their board, I love that. I adore the idea that just, hey, I've got Pierce, so every time I take out a Digimon, I'm also doing a security check. Oh yeah, but every time I take out a Digimon, I make myself active, and you just go through their entire board of resting Digimon, doing a security check every time, and then you finish active to do another security check. Again, it's not a combo I've seen absolutely crushing from the tournament reports I've been seeing, and check out the PTCG Review on Twitter, who's doing an awesome job collating all this stuff together. It seems like that combo is too good. And again, maybe it's just going to be too expensive and never work out, but there is too much potential for that to just fly completely under the radar forever.
Most definitely. I think in terms of yellow, their biggest problem right now is that the company is perhaps a little scared of their abilities, that if they give them too much support, that they might end up making them a tier 0 deck for a short time.
And we see that in TCGs all the time. I mean, all the games I follow, except for Digimon because it's way too early, they've all had to ban or nerf cards because it's fine, and then something happens that tips it. And I do think yellow are absolutely primed for that. For one card, and it might be 3 or 4 sets down the line, but one card that looks completely innocuous, and then the player base gets hold of it and goes, and broken. And it just completely, and that's inevitable in TCGs, right? You cannot make an ongoing TCG. Because, I mean, to use Pokemon as an example, that is the second biggest card game in the world behind Magic. It's absolutely huge. They have 13 full-time game testers. There was a really good GameSpot article about it. So there are 13 people, and they are the entire testing group for the Pokemon trading card game. And that has releases, as do most big TCGs. That has really regular releases. And I keep seeing all these comments from people who clearly don't really understand how TCGs are made, going, how could they print this card? How did they not see it happening? And what they're forgetting is you're taking a group of 13 people, testing this new set. Most of the time they've got maybe a month, maybe 2 to test this set. And then as soon as the card gets released, you've got tens of thousands of people all of a sudden testing this card, and then you add in the internet and the quick way with which we can all exchange ideas, and it really is not surprising to me how a testing group of just over a dozen people can miss something that tens of thousands of people can figure out. It's why, I mean, we've seen things in Digimon already. There is one person on the group I've blocked so far, which, for the record, is huge. because I block a lot of people because I cannot deal with the negativity. Don't need it. And they were being extremely rude. And one of the things they were saying, they were talking in absolutes. They were going, this is an amazing card. This is objectively good. I don't see how you couldn't see this. That's a bad take. And they were talking in these absolutes. And the thing I try and tell people, and it's especially true of Digimon at the moment, we know nothing. The game has not been out that long. The player base is not that big. For pretty much the entire time, well, no, for the entire time it's been out, we've had the whole coronavirus thing going on. So the amount of testing and tournaments we've been able to do is even lower than it would usually be. And the fact of the matter is, as the game stands at the moment, our knowledge level is just terrible. Absolutely terrible. We know next to nothing about the game. And it's going to take a long time to actually build up to the stage where we do have this knowledge. So anyone that's turning around at the moment going, oh, well, you know, this card is objectively amazing, this card is better than this card, it's a really bad idea at this stage to start trying to talk in absolutes about what we know. Because actually, I am willing to bet there are great decks and combos based on cards we've already got that we just haven't spotted yet because no one's tested it, or the couple people that are testing it just haven't told anyone.
Right. I mean, the Digimon TCG group is comprised of 6,000 members, which is an amazing amount for such a new game that's not even released yet. But if you compare that to other TCG groups that are more well established, it's just a drop in the bucket right now. There's much more, many more heads, as some would say, that could be testing things out right now.
But it's also really hard to test. Like, I mean, I live in a proper rural part of the UK, so a lot of playing for me is kind of kitchen table meta with my wife and brothers and friends that pop round. But whereas I can, you know, something like Keyforge, I love Keyforge. Something like Keyforge, I can be like, boom, here's a deck, let's go. The first game we're playing, they get the rules, and then we're off. Digimon, you know, trying to drag out Digimon with some of me brothers or me mates and go, hey, all the cards are in Japanese, but here's an iPad with all of the English scans on. It's a much harder sell, which means I'm willing to bet the amount of testing that's happening from each person in the group on average for Digimon is significantly lower than any other card game. Because yeah, sure, we've got like-minded friends and we play online and Tabletop Simulator and all of those games. But actually, it's so much harder to test this game when it's not out in English. And even when we're playing, I mean, the Japanese cards I've got, I had to import from Japan, as did everybody. It's so difficult. But I mean, that for me makes it a lot more fun. You know, something like Pokemon, and don't get me wrong, I love Pokemon. It's very rare that I'm surprised at Pokemon, especially more than a week after the set comes out, because there are so many people testing that so furiously, and we all know what cards are coming because of, you know, they've already been released in Japan. So, you know, Darkness Ablaze comes out in August, and by September, we are all going to know what the best decks are, including Darkness Ablaze, because there are just going to be countless thousands of games being played. And every so often you see a secret deck come out, but there's so many people testing it so thoroughly, it just doesn't happen. Whereas a game like Digimon, I am always poised because there's so many combos and decks out there that we're just not testing.
Right. I've seen that a few times in games like Card Fight, where 6 months later a rogue deck will come out because the game is relatively small compared to the big three, and it'll take the tournaments away for a month or two and it'll drop off. But it's also important to remember that it came out like 6 months before it became popular. So a universal question before swapping hosts for a moment. To give everyone an idea of you as a card player, if you could have an ideal deck in this game with your favorite Digimon, color, and play style, what would it be?
I mean, I'm not a huge Digimon dude. I'm learning and I'm loving, and I'm waiting for when Cyber Sleuth finally becomes not even cheap on the Switch, right? Just a vaguely respectable price. And I'm in. I did see a really cheap auction in America the other day, which was very upsetting. But I mean, for me, I want to do the Patamon Seraphimon line. That's what's speaking to me lately. I want to play that line. But for me, it's aggro. I'm an aggro player in Pokemon, in Keyforge, in Transformers, in Final Fantasy, and in basically every card game I play, I always go towards aggro decks. And it's not a deliberate, conscious thing. I'm always sitting there and I test so many different things and I'm trying to mix it up and change play styles. And I tell myself, Ross, today you must try something different. And I do, I promised you I do. And then I just end up playing super aggro decks because that's apparently how I roll. So even though I want to play yellow, if we properly start getting tournaments over here, you'll probably see me playing red. And right now, I can sit here and tell you I don't want to play red. Red is not the type that interests me. But if we start having proper tournaments in Europe, you'll probably see me sitting there repping red decks. Because I always go aggro.
That probably summarizes too many people.
I also feel confident I'll be playing something dumb and stupid that is not actually that good. I pride myself on playing a very, very small number of mirror matches, and every so often there have been a few tournaments where I will rock up to legitimately big tournaments and do really well with a deck that literally no one else in the room is playing, but it's far, far more often I'll rock up with a deck no one's playing and just crash and burn.
Everyone loves a good meme deck. All right, so just one moment while I swap host.
It's Ross, the Wasp Boss, the Sheikh Zula, the Mike Rula, the Old Schooler. You want a trip? He'll bring it to you. I am so getting an autograph after the lightning round.
That was weird. Let's do this.
So, if Pokemon's your favorite card game, what's your second favorite card game?
That's not a fair question. Top of my head, right. And okay, I know this is a lightning round. I'm really sorry. I want to preface this by saying it changes on an almost daily basis. But today, Marvel Champions.
I feel it. A little offended. Wish it was Digimon, but I feel it.
I love Digimon. The problem is I don't get to play much Digimon at the moment because we don't have English cards. And I love Digimon mechanically. Digimon is too new and too small, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
But let's be clear, I have nothing but... Anyone who's been anywhere near my channel will know I have nothing but love for the Digimon TCG. And I did give you my preface at the beginning. I could easily have said Digimon. I could easily have said Keyforge.
Right. So, this is especially important knowing that you're not that big into Digimon at the moment. Who would you say is the best Digimon coming from outside the series?
Seraphimon. No, sorry, Monzemon. I forgot about Monzemon. It's a giant bear with balloons. Definitely Monzemon. Let's do it.
And you have watched a little bit of the anime. What's your favorite Dustin?
I have no strong feelings. I'm sorry. I have no strong feelings, like, at all.
That's okay. So, what's the biggest disappointment for you in the series and the games, in this game even?
In what regard?
Player's choice.
I mean, the biggest disappointment is we haven't had an English release announced yet. Like, the amount of time and effort I am dedicating to this game is frankly ludicrous. I mean, we're already into, and I'm not exaggerating, literally, I mean, we're now counting in hundreds of hours, and the amount of time I've spent playing this game, learning this game, making videos on this game. You know, I have jumped like full on head first into it, and there is every possibility that there's no English release. The players outside of Japan get bored, and all my time ends up wasted.
Right. Let's hope for the best. So
I don't think that's going to happen, but that is still a chance.
It is. Now, if you had 60 seconds to tell the community anything you wanted, what would it be? 60 seconds. Go.
This is probably not the answer you're expecting, right? But I'm sorry, with all the discussions been going on at the moment, we all need to be nice to each other. Like, we all need to be inclusive. There's been so many things I've seen lately focused around the Pokemon community, but it is not just the Pokemon community, especially about the treatment of women who come along to tournaments. And every time I see it, I just see a bunch of dudes going, I would never act like that. And I'm like, well, that's not enough though, is it? Like, you might not act like that, but how many times does your mate come away from playing a female player and comment on their looks rather than their playing ability? And how many times do you actually say to them, dude, grow up, can we actually start being nice and inclusive to people? And it's really started to annoy me, because I've got a lot of female friends that play card games, and every single, and I mean this without exception, every single one of them has these stories, and it's not good enough. And you see all the women out there just screaming kind of like, seriously, can you listen to us? And all the dudes are just like, oh yeah, no, that's really bad, we shouldn't do that. I would never do that. I mean, I will talk. And it's just like, well, why don't you actually start talking about it more and start listening to people? There you go, 60 seconds. Sorry, probably not the answer you wanted, but that's what's on my mind today.
I think it's a great answer. Anyway, time for me to go and swap back.
All right, I'm back. Now, in closing, is there anything else you'd like to discuss with the community?
I mean, for me, the big things basically are, first of all, just a shout out to the community for being awesome. It is rare that a game grows as big, as quick as Digimon has done, especially on Facebook, and remains a good community. The mods we've got on the Facebook group are absolutely phenomenal, wonderful people. And I don't know if everyone realizes quite how lucky we are. I am in other trading card game groups where the mods stifle discussion, constantly delete and lock threads because I've literally had threads deleted, and I kid you not, I promise you this is true, because they generated too much discussion. And we are really lucky to have a great community, really good mods, and just everyone seems to be friendly and happy. And maybe it's just the early optimism, maybe it'll fade, but I really, really hope we get to keep rolling with it. The other thing is, just like I was saying earlier, don't hold out too much hope for an English release too early. I think we will get one. I do believe we'll get an English release. And what we're doing is absolutely right. I get a lot of questions about how can we get an English release? Exactly what we're doing. Play the game, buy the product, talk about it online, build the Facebook group, make videos, make articles, watch videos, watch articles, share them around. Anything we can do to build to the discussion. I saw somebody the other day who said, oh, there's no way Bandai are watching this Facebook group. I mean, firstly, I've seen them like comments and posts in the Facebook group, so I know they are. Secondly, of course they are. You know that Bandai are watching all the Facebook groups about their products, and especially something like the TCG. You know they're paying attention. And if we can keep doing what we're doing, I do believe we'll get an English release. But we all need to chill out on a few points sometimes. Like, one of the big things I've seen is, power creep. It can't be power creep, it's set 2. We've had a few games with set 1. Set 2 is coming out really quickly after set 1. And I've seen all this talk about, power creep. No. You cannot see a couple of cards from set 2 and start going, power creep. We need to firstly have more time with set 1. And then we need to see the whole of set 2. Then we need to have some games with set 1 and set 2 combined. And at that point, we can start having the discussion about whether or not there is power creep. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, we're pretty early on in the reveal cycle. They're showing us the best cards in the set. They are literally showing us the best cards in the set, when actually, and it's been proven that one of the very, very best cards from New Evolution is Gabumon. The one that draws a card when you play it. Another one of the very best cards in the set is Flower Cannon. And a lot of time it is these littler, less exciting cards, in quotes, that end up being, the real game-changing cards. So I do think, and don't get me wrong, I'm as bad as anyone. You see the videos I make, I am massively hypocritical at this stage. I understand that. But I think there are times we all need to take a step back and go, we'll probably get an English release, but we can wait. That new card looks quite good, but maybe it's not indicative of ridiculous power creep. Things of that nature. Of course, if we stopped talking like that, we wouldn't have much discussion, so maybe I'm jabbering about rubbish. That's my TED Talk.
All right. With that, I think that concludes this spotlight.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. This was fun. I like talking Digimon and card games in general. It's kind of my thing.
Thanks for being here, Ross.
Look after yourself, dude. Speak to you again.
Until next time, guys, stay wholesome.